Today, we're going to talk about Frozen 2. And if you're wondering why, Frozen 2 is something Lin-Manuel Miranda himself said I should tackle. He tweeted, "Hard to talk about Frozen 2 without spoilers, but I'll just say this. Kristen Anderson Lopez and Bobby Lopez have been heroes/mentors my entire career, and her incredible intelligence and heart and his craft and talent are at the peak of their powers. It's such a ding-dang smart, gorgeous score." In the context, though, I may have to do a Howard Ho-style video about why it's so brilliant. When Lin-Manuel Miranda hints at you to do something, you do it. So get your winter coats, we're gonna do some Frozen 2 musical analysis. And by we, I mean me and my guest host and Frozen expert and talented singer, Annika. Oh yeah, and spoilers ahead. To go back to what Lin was saying, the music of Frozen 2 is pretty brilliant precisely because of how it continues the story of Frozen in a way that is musically sophisticated. So if we go back to Frozen 1 and look at the world that is established, there's actually some Aboriginal sounds in the first Frozen score that hint at some ancient culture. Na, na, hey, ya, na. Now you might be familiar with that opening melody since it's what we hear at the beginning of both Frozen 1 and 2. And in Frozen 2, it's even expanded into a musical sequence with the new characters, the North Uldra people. It's no secret that the North Uldra were based on the real-life Scandinavian indigenous peoples known as the Sami, with Disney even entering an agreement with the Sami people on Frozen 2 to give them some creative input and also benefit sharing on the film. Here they are being thanked in the closing credits. One reason the Sami people were looking for recognition might be because that opening choral piece is actually written by Sami musician Frode Fellheim and references the sound of traditional Sami singing known as the Yoik.
The Yoik tradition, it's a musical vocal tradition that is regarded as the oldest living tradition in Europe, actually.
So knowing that their culture was being featured in a huge franchise, the Sami wanted to make sure it was being represented authentically. Oh yeah, and Kristoff was originally written as a Sami, which is why he's wearing this Sami outfit. But beyond this, there is a less well-known musical Easter egg in Frozen 1 that takes on much greater significance in Frozen 2. In Frozen, when Elsa leaves the kingdom and the fjord freezes over, we hear this melody. That sounds like an ocarina. But in actuality, it comes from Norwegian singer Christine Hals using a Norwegian singing technique called Kulning. Here to explain Kulning is Kulning expert Annika.
Kulning isn't just a mystical sounding background noise. It's actually an ancient Scandinavian herding call, and it's kind of difficult to execute. So how is Kulning different from other ways of singing? Well, since Scandinavian shepherdesses would have to coax cattle down from way up in the mountains, their calls had to travel, and sounds that are loud and high tend to do the trick. Kulning also has a nasally sound and sometimes swings up at the end like this. The Kulning melody in Frozen 2, performed by Norwegian singer Aurora, also features this characteristic upswing. So even though it's sometimes referred to as the forest opera, Be my love, the style is pretty different from traditional Western singing, which is why you might not have even recognized Christine Hals' Kulning as a human voice when watching Frozen. Interestingly, if there was danger, the shepherdesses would also use Kulning to warn each other. Ooh, I wonder if Frozen 2 builds on that idea.
Annika, I'm gonna get there. Okay, now in the first Frozen, the Kulning melody is this. We never know where this Kulning voice comes from, or if it's just part of the film score. In the second Frozen, the Kulning melody returns, but is now not just part of the score, but something that Elsa can actually hear. It goes from being in the background to the foreground. In fact, Elsa's search for the source of that Kulning melody is what drives the entire story. And one way it helps drive the story is that the Kulning melody was changed to this.
Do you hear that?
They changed the melody to this because composers Robert Lopez and Kristen Lopez wanted to reference the opening of the Dies Irae,
The Dies Irae.
a 13th century Gregorian chant that translates to Day of Wrath or Judgment Day. It's usually sung as part of the Requiem or Death Mass, and because of that association with death, the melody is often referenced in other pieces of music and in tons of movies. Musicologist Alex Ludwig keeps a running list of all the instances of the Dies Irae in film and TV, and he consulted in a Vox video about this phenomenon. Go check it out. But being associated with death, you have to wonder why Elsa feels so attracted to this melody. Is she going to her doom? Is this siren a beacon or a warning? Well, in a way, it is a warning because despite famously not being bothered by the cold,
the cold never bothered me anyway.
She nevertheless gets cold here. See her breath vapor that didn't exist before? And she starts to actually freeze to death, kinda like Anna did in the first Frozen. But the place where this is happening is Ottohallen, the mystical ancient frozen river of memories. So maybe the rules here are just different? This is the Hall of Ancestors after all. In Norwegian, et means ancestry and halla means hall, kind of similar sounding to the Norse myth of Valhalla.
But you thought you died and gone to Valhalla.
Or the famous Hall of Slain Warriors in Asgard. The song All Is Found even describes Ottohallen as
a river full of memory.
Yes, I've also read that Ottohallen is explained as a combination of Finnish words, combining Otto, the Finnish sea god, with Halla, the Finnish word for frost. But I'd like to make the case that Arendelle is based more on Norway than anywhere else, and here to make that case is my Norwegian expert, Annika.
It is no secret that the Kingdom of Arendelle is based on Scandinavia, but more specifically by the country of Norway, which actually has a town called Arendal. One way to tell we're in Norway is by the rose-malling.
Something very, very small, but it loomed very large in the world of Frozen, and that is the idea of rose-malling.
Appearing on the characters' outfits, Arendelle's architecture,
columns, ceilings. You'll find this everywhere in Norway.
And the patterns in Elsa's magic.
Rose-malling was the starting point for a lot of the language of Elsa's magic.
So if you've never heard of rose-malling, it's basically traditional Norwegian painting that is really flowery, swirly, and decorative. Pretty much the perfect aesthetic of a Disney princess movie. There are also many references to Norwegian mythology and folklore, such as the trolls, the water spirit, and the earth giants. Then, if we look to the short Olaf's Frozen Adventure, Olaf discovers that during Christmas, the people of Arendelle make lefse.
I must get home for my family's holiday tradition, rolling the lefse.
And Yule goats, which are all Norwegian holiday traditions.
Bake a giant cookie in the wavy shape of Norway.
Now, what was that cookie in the shape of again? Okay, you're right. Later in the song, we do see a girl dressed as Santa Lucia, which is a Swedish Christmas tradition, so I can't claim Norway was the only country Arendelle was modeled after. But the creators by far reference Norway the most in interviews and documentaries.
The story is telling us that these characters need to live in a world that is extremely vast. That eventually led me to Norway.
And the animators actually traveled to Norway for some background research on the culture and scenery.
Thanks, Annika. Because Ottohallen translates from Norwegian as the Hall of Ancestors, it makes sense that Elsa would have a duet here with the ghost of her North Aldrin mother. It's here that Elsa sings the big song, Show Yourself, which includes a reprise of an earlier song from the movie called All Is Found. The bedtime lullaby that Elsa's mother sings to Elsa and Anna.
Where the north wind meets the sea.
And here's where you see the design of the Lopez's, because the chorus of All Is Found is actually a variation of the Dies Irae.
For in this river all is found.
Only one note is different from the original Dies Irae. And even that one note that's different is still basically the same minor 7/1 cadence from the Dies Irae if you continue the first phrase. These variations on the Dies Irae allow them to create a subliminal association without being so on the nose. But being one of the climaxes of the film, Show Yourself doesn't just play the Dies Irae as itself, it actually transforms the Dies Irae into the major mode. This reharmonization from minor to major indicates that Elsa's embracing the lessons of the past, the lessons of her ancestors trying to tell her stuff beyond the grave. In fact, the one time she sings the Dies Irae melody with actual lyrics, not just on awe, but with words, is in Show Yourself, and the lyrics are,
I'm ready to learn.
So in a way, learning about the past, learning from the dead, has become positive because of this lesson. And what is the lesson Elsa's mother is trying to teach her? Well, we, along with Elsa, find out that her grandfather, the then King of Arendelle, was actually the aggressor against the North Uldra people, and built a dam specifically to hurt them, and then attacked them at a celebration of the opening of the dam, knowing they'd have their guard down. And right before she freezes solid, Elsa sends this message to Anna, who receives it in the form of an ice memory. Sort of like the spirit world's version of a cell phone video.
What is it? The truth about the past.
That past turns out to have a real-life counterpart.
The dam isn't strengthening our waters, it's hurting the forest.
While Arendelle is a fictional kingdom, its real-life counterpart, Norway, faced similar opposition from the Indigenous Sami people when the government began construction on the controversial Alta Dam in 1979. The proposed dam threatened to destroy a Sami village and disrupt salmon fishing and reindeer herding along the Alta River. In response, a Sami protest movement formed. Though protesters were able to get the government to scale down the dam to save the village, they couldn't stop the dam from moving forward entirely. And this all occurred within the context of a larger struggle for Sami recognition. Starting in the 1800s, a program of forced assimilation called Norwegianization attempted to phase out Sami culture, which was deemed inferior. Yeah, it was so bad that after it was discontinued, the Sami community received reparations, and even the King of Norway himself apologized. So, Frozen 2's story is more than just a fairy tale. It addresses some real-world inequities, and maybe we shouldn't be surprised that Frozen 2 would tackle Indigenous representation because the original Frozen did such a great job of representing women.
An action-adventure movie led by these two heroines that happen to be sisters. They don't need some dude to come save the day, like they can save themselves. I love being a part of that.
So yes, Frozen established Elsa and Anna as feminist icons, and Frozen 2 continued that trend with a new feminist icon. Of course, I'm talking about Kristoff. Here's more on that from Annika.
We get to see Kristoff as a model male feminist, unapologetically showing emotion, treating Anna as an equal.
Help me up! We'll meet you around!
It's a breath of fresh air. In particular, I want to focus on Kristoff's song Lost in the Woods, which sounds a lot like an 80s rock ballad. I mean, this could have easily been a Chicago song.
Oh yes, Annika, and we have the Chicago Kristoff mashup to prove it.
Again, you're gone. Off on a different path than mine. I'm left behind, wondering if I should follow.
In Lost in the Woods, Kristoff sings about how much he loves Anna, but can't figure out how to express it. So if you were like me, when you saw the song in theaters, you were kind of thrown off by a Disney prince showing genuine emotion.
And little boys don't often see representation of other boys having really big, loving feelings.
Lost in the Woods clearly expresses and embraces everything in Kristoff's heart. And it's especially impactful because Kristoff only sings reindeers are better than people in the first movie.
Reindeers are better than people.
In which he banters with Sven, voiced by Kristoff, about how people are the worst. But we can tell he's secretly longing for human connection.
Come on, Kristoff. Let down your guard.
Lost in the Woods is paired with many feminist lines that the actors thought were pretty revolutionary.
And he also has two lines that I love.
Kristen Bell, the voice of Anna, really appreciates the lines,
He rescues Anna at one point, and it's in the midst of battle, and he looks at her, and the first thing he says is,
I'm here. What do you need?
He doesn't say, stand back, I've got this. And I was like, I almost stood up when I first saw it. I was like, didn't we know how profound that line is?
Yeah.
And then in the end, Anna apologizes for something, and he says,
My love is not fragile.
I know, right?
She thinks they're wonderful examples for little boys that will help us tackle toxic masculinity. See, Frozen 2 has more feminism than just giving Elsa pants.
Thanks, Annika. But of course, you'll know from watching my Hamilton videos that music is perhaps most powerful when it can tell a story by charting the transformation of a character. And the two Frozens do this quite brilliantly. In fact, I think there's a music theory reason for why. So when you look at the... way to steal this video's thunder, Kristen Anderson Lopez. But since you've done part of the work for us, let me try to fill in the blanks and elaborate on what you're talking about. It's an octave. Safe, known boundaries.
Into the unknown. That's an octave.
Then a ninth. Dipping a toe outside boundary, but coming home.
Into the unknown. That's actually...
one higher, it's a ninth.
Then an 11th. Elsa has gone way out there. Boundaries breached.
Into the unknown. It's like, whoa.
What is this ninth versus an octave versus an 11th? Well, if you count the number of notes in a scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 8th note you encounter above will be the 8th or octave. So by that logic, the 9th will be the next note above the 8th, and then the 11th is 2 notes above that note. And indeed, as Kristen explains, Elsa's melodic leaps go from an octave
Into the unknown.
to a 9th
Into the unknown.
to an 11th.
Into the unknown.
She's climbing higher and each time jumping off the same note, which is musically like someone who tries and falls back down and then gets up and tries again. It's almost like that scene where Elsa struggles against the stormy waters, gets hit, but then tries again and gets hit again until she finally tames the water. And I mean literally tames, because the water spirit animal is a horse that Elsa learns to ride. So the act of leaping up musically represents Elsa's act of venturing further into the unknown. Using big melodic leaps as a metaphor for going out far into the unknown is a pretty standard musical metaphor going back at least to the most famous octave leap in songwriting history. But to understand why that octave leap is so important, it's important to note that some of the producers of The Wizard of Oz wanted to cut the song.
I mean, this is a full octave leap. I mean, that's a big leap for a popular song. In fact, producers were worried that nobody would buy the song because it would be too hard to sing this opening leap.
Leaps of an octave were considered difficult for the average person at home to sing, and so they thought the song wouldn't sell sheet music. Obviously, as one of the most popular songs of all time, that's ridiculous. But pop songwriting back then had a rule typified in Charles Harris's book, How to Write a Popular Song from 1906. He said, songs should be written in the range between a middle C and an E an octave up, or a tenth, and he said big melodic leaps should be avoided. In other words, he would not be happy with Kristen Anderson Lopez.
It's an 11th.
Which is an interval they strongly urge you not to write.
And further, as his example in the book of what not to do, he actually showed a melody featuring an octave leap on the word somewhere. He called the octave leap on somewhere bad songwriting. Oh well, I guess rules were made to be broken. What Charles Harris didn't count on was the fact that singing somewhere on the octave leap is actually good prosody. In other words, it's a melody that paints the lyric. Yip Harburg, who wrote the lyrics for Over the Rainbow, describes prosody this way. Words make you think thoughts, music makes you feel a feeling, but a song makes you feel a thought. And in Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is singing about going to a faraway place up over the rainbow. Leaping up to the faraway note of an octave musically complements that lyric. In other words, we feel her thought, her longing. This is traditionally what's known as an I want song, in which the protagonist of a musical expresses their main goal in the story. Now, to bring this back to Frozen, journalist Justin McElroy categorized every song from a Disney animated film into this handy chart, and the want song category is where he put Let It Go. I guess you could say Elsa is singing about wanting to let it go, but it's technically not a want song because we actually see her doing it. Let me explain. Let It Go begins as Elsa's want song. One way we can tell is that the opening intro to Let It Go keeps changing and can't seem to settle on a single motif. We get a chord progression over 4 bars, which is repeated twice, but only the first and third bars of that progression are repeated verbatim. The first time we hear bar 2, we get a half step up and a half step down. The second time we hear it, we get a half step down and a half step down. The first time we hear bar 4, it's a B flat sus going to B minor. The second time we hear bar 4, it's a B flat sus going to B flat major. Lin uses the same technique in the opening of Wait For It, where there's a slight variation indicating a restless mind.
It's different just that one time. I know. And never anywhere else.
Lin got this idea from the opening number to Jonathan Larson's musical Tick, Tick, Boom.
Dun, 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 dun. But he never does it the same way twice until the beat drops. I think he's trying to mimic what it sounds like to work on a song until you find it.
Similarly, at the beginning of Let It Go, Elsa is trying to find herself. But then a weird thing happens. Elsa creates a castle out of ice and snow and creates a sparkly dress and is having a great time. In other words, she doesn't just want to let it go, she's doing it. Let It Go is more than a want song. She's creating a new home, a new uniform. It's an arrival song. For example, in the Broadway version of Frozen, may it rest in peace. Let It Go doesn't just show up here in the story, but actually comes back to end the entire show as a culmination. And if you stick with me for this, I will show you how Let It Go becomes the foundation of Elsa's songs in Frozen 2, Into the Unknown and Show Yourself. And it all has to do with the type of melodic leaps that Kristen Anderson Lopez was talking about.
If you look at it from a musicology point of view.
Now, the famous chorus of Let It Go doesn't feature an octave leap, but it does expand in range very methodically. If you look at the melody and just chart the peaks, you will see that it actually ascends up the major scale stepwise from F, G to A flat, to B flat, to C, D flat, to E flat, and that ascent might actually be why the song feels so satisfying. Even Snoop Dogg agrees.
I'm just sitting in my car listening to Let It Go.
But then the melody surprises us by not going further up, but instead by going down stepwise.
Let the storm
to E flat,
rage on,
and then
the
D flat,
cold
and C, and then taking a leap down to A flat. So why would a melody that was ascending upwards so methodically suddenly then expand downward? Isn't that a mixed message? Well, in a way it is, because even while the wanting is represented by the ascent, the arrival is represented by the descent. So Elsa isn't just trying to push herself to greater heights, she's also planting her feet down and growing new roots. And this is exemplified by Elsa's declaration, "The cold never bothered me anyway," a clapback at the system that held back her powers. It's on these words that Elsa's melody goes downward and is sung primarily between 2 notes, D flat and C, or a minor second. All a minor second is the note directly above or below a starting note. So in this case, the note right below a D flat is a C. And here's the entire phrase. So in short, the chorus of Let It Go consists of an upward melodic striving towards something somewhere, followed by a falling minor second theme settling down. And these two competing ideas in Frozen 2 separate to become the 2 songs Into the Unknown and Show Yourself. As we've already discussed, Into the Unknown relentlessly goes up to a degree that makes it really hard for people to sing.
Jimmy!
Which is an interval they strongly urge you not to write.
But that is how much Elsa wants to go into the unknown. In other words, Into the Unknown is Elsa's want song. And similarly, fast forward to Show Yourself, the main musical motif of Show Yourself, which occurs on the words Show Yourself, is when the accompaniment stops and Elsa sings
Show Yourself
on a descending whole step, which later becomes a descending half step.
Show Yourself.
the same half-step motif we saw on the line, "The cold never bothered me." This half-step down idea is even mirrored in the visuals showing her stepping downward. And she literally sings the words, in other words, Show Yourself isn't about the big leaps of into the unknown, but it's about settling into yourself. And for Elsa, this means being outside of the village and being with nature, her people, the North Uldra. And in Let It Go, that's why she's happy. She's in her element among the elements. She's one with the wind and sky. But by the end of the first Frozen, Elsa goes back to the castle, where her ice powers are embraced by the people, but she's still not among nature. She's in the castle. In other words, if a story arc is like a circle, then Elsa hadn't come full circle by the end, but is actually somewhere here and needing to change.
Did you know that an enchanted forest is a place of transformation?
So it's in this context at the beginning of Frozen 2 that the North Wind Siren song is beckoning Elsa into the enchanted forest where she will discover that she doesn't belong in a castle. And by the end of the film, Elsa has relinquished her queenly title to Anna.
Queen Anna of Arendelle!
And lives out in the forest among the North Uldra and her spirit friends. It's only at the end of Frozen 2 that she comes full circle, when she realizes that being a queen in a castle and achieving the Disney princess model for happily ever after is not for her. She needs to break through the old traditions that were holding her back, learn more about her role in the history of oppression, and become connected to the community around her. She needed to get over the fear of the unknown and go headfirst into it. Elsa's narrative complexity, which has her reaching the heights of outer strength, as well as the depths of inner truth, makes her a Disney princess that breaks the mold in so many ways. Boundaries breached indeed. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to also thank my patrons, especially the newest patrons, Amber Coates, Colin, Kristen Hyland, Maggie Christensen, Margaret Ellingson, and Randy Tamura. And a very special thanks goes out to my collaborator, Annika. I'm also proud to be partnering with Soundfly, an online music education platform that I sometimes contribute to. There you can learn songwriting, music theory, mixing, beat making, composition, arranging, and so much more. Get 15% off your monthly subscription to Soundfly when you mention my name using the promo code HHMusic15. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more content about how music works. Peace.